Hey everybody, my next guest coming up right now for you on the Jim Master Show Entertainment Lifestyle Celebrity Talk Show series is a terrific fan of Johnny Carson, but so much more than that. He's a brilliant comedian, writer, author, host of the Carson Podcast. He loves Johnny Carson, just like I know you do as well. That's why you're tuning into this episode, Mark Malkoff. Now, he's from New York originally, as I am too, you guys know, but he has been all over the country. New York, yes, but also LA. He's headed to Nebraska, which of course we know is where our wonderful Johnny Carson came from. Iowa first, then Nebraska. And he has so many tales he's been sharing in a spectacular new book that everybody's raving about. Love Johnny Carson, one obsessive fan's journey to find the genius behind the legend. An extraordinary book, an extraordinary read, chock full of nuggets. And, you know, he sets the record straight, too, about beloved Johnny Carson. There's always these myths, these legends out there, these tales about Johnny Carson. And he's really researched this. Over 400 interviews. He's talked with people from the television series itself, The Tonight Show. He's talked to people who knew Johnny Carson well, who didn't work on The Tonight Show, others in Hollywood, other legends, other industry folk. He's gathered all the nuggets, all the juice, and all the information, but he does it in a loving way. He shares the information in a way that really pays homage to and celebrates this television, Hollywood, entertainment, and broadcast legend known as Johnny Carson. Many of you know that I have worked with PBS for many, many years, and you may have seen the special that we did. This was through American Masters, and I had an opportunity to, co-host a lot of different shows with PBS, but this one was very special. And Mark and I were just chatting before we went on air. He remembers seeing this one because he scoops up everything Johnny Carson, like I do too. This was Johnny Carson, King of Late Night, an American Masters special. That's Tom Stewart with PBS, my co-host. You may know him from WNET Channel 13 in New York, the voice of 13 for many, many, many years. He was also an actor, soap opera actor, and so much more. We co-hosted this King of Late Night. It was a wonderful look at Johnny Carson's life. Dick Cavett was interviewed, and he was out in the Hamptons. And that was really a fantastic special for American Masters, which aired nationally on PBS. So you guys know we've referenced Johnny Carson many times here on our series as well. Dick Cavett, Regis Philbin, Mike Douglas, Jack Parr, Steve Allen, all of them, Merv Griffin, John Davidson, who's been on our show as a wonderful friend of our show several times as well. And now we have Mark with us too. Again, a terrific comedian and a fantastic aficionado of everything Johnny Carson. The book itself, as I mentioned, I want to show it again because you got to go and get it. Everybody's talking about it. And he's going across the country from coast to coast, really sharing some intimate stories and wonderful details. He's really made this almost his life's calling. If you didn't know, this is also the 100th birthday this week of beloved Johnny Carson. Now, Love Johnny Carson is a joyful, fun celebration of all things Carson. And it's informed, as I said, by more than 400 unique interviews, including wonderful Carol Burnett, Mel Brooks, Bob Saget, Larry King, Michael J. Fox, Paula Poundstone. Paula was a guest on our show as well. She was a hilarious guest to have, not to mention dozens of staffers, friends, writers, and many others. And Mark's obsession began when he was a kid. We're going to let him tell that story. And the book literally is hot off the presses. It just came out, and it gives readers an inside look at Johnny Carson's life, career, impact on pop culture, and also pulling from those extensive interviews, which he amassed, again, all these great stories, more than anyone else in entertainment history, I think, as far as Johnny Carson. One of the most revealing and intimate biographies of Carson to date. Take him some time to put this together. Yes, absolutely. But he is here to tell the story. Share your Johnny Carson favorite moments and memories, folks. in the comment section below. We would love to hear if you're a Johnny Carson fan of The Tonight Show, and of course, all those before and after. Jack Parr before, Jay, and all the rest after. Mark, again, is on assignment now in Tinseltown. It's my pleasure to welcome here. We're so happy to get a few free moments with him because he's so busy right now. Mark Malkoff. Mark, welcome to the Jim Masters Show. It's a pleasure to have you here, my friend.
Jim, thanks for having me. This is great.
Well, we've been a fan of each other for quite some time, and I realized and knew your not just obsession, but your real respect and appreciation for the legend of Johnny Carson. Tell us the story. For first, congratulations on this amazing book.
Thank you.
Tell us the story about what inspired you. I would say for me, my dad, had the Tonight Show on. He also watched Ernie Kovacs. That's
Wow.
in the past as well. People might not remember, which was a great series. And my father was still up at night, and I would sneak out of the room, and the Tonight Show was on, and I'd be able to watch it with him. Was your dad an influence, your folks an influence for you as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, when I was growing up, my dad would tell me he remembers going to 6B when Carson was in New York. It was 1968. And he would tell me who the guests were on the show. It was Barbara McNair, it was Doug McClure, and David Fry. And he just remembers Johnny doing Karnak the Magnificent and just every detail about being there. And I felt I was there. He would let me stay up sometimes when I was a kid, late on a Friday night. I would watch the show, and I just fell in love with the program and with Johnny and likability. And then they would do these primetime anniversary shows, and those are the things on VHS that I would just watch over and over again. I mean, Johnny was so good with the kids, with the animals, with people that weren't famous, like the potato chip lady. And it was like this party I wanted to be a part of. But I think the anniversary clip shows were the thing that really got me into Johnny.
The potato chip lady was one of the greatest routines ever. And if
Yeah.
folks didn't see it, YouTube, and of course, I think it's Antenna TV that has Johnny Carson. They say the Johnny Carson show was the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, but Carson owned the material, and they air the re-airs of it. And then of course there's YouTube, and the internet has sort of given it a rebirth, which is amazing. But that episode with the potato chip lady, and they had it all set up with the bowl of potato chips behind him, and she's showing all these shapes for anybody who didn't see it, the shapes of the potato chips, and how she was so happy about showing how she has these potato chips that have shapes of animals and what have you. And then when she looks away, he grabs one and crunch, and
Yeah, she almost had a heart
he
attack. She was
almost
in her mid-60s. I think she was 65, Indiana, a potato chip inspector, and noticed that the potato chips, some of them were in the shape of objects and people. Goes on Johnny's show, and Johnny, in his brilliance, devises this practical joke and has Ed McMahon distract her, and then he bites down on the chip, and she has about a heart attack, thinking that, as Johnny said, that he was eating her act, but it was a separate bowl of potato chips. And it was really funny. She, like a lot of these people that were not famous, went on the show with talents, and she traveled to Japan, all over the country, making personal appearances. Johnny had that power. If somebody went on with a book or a unique talent or story, that their lives could be changed.
Yes, if he gave that look when a comedian or entertainer was on, and it really made the careers of so many. Tell us about some of those early inspirations for you, and then how you really took the inspiration, not only as a kid, but really took deep dives into the man and everything Carson and the Tonight Show as well. What were those steps like from being, a developing fan as a kid with your dad to
Sure.
then really making it something as an obsessed fan, but really an aficionado of it all? How did you develop all of that?
I was just really into entertainment and late night, and when I was a kid, I was in Hershey, Pennsylvania until I was 18 and moved to New York, and I'd go to NBC where Johnny did the Tonight Show from 62 to 72, and I'd go to Late Night with David Letterman in 6A, and I knew the local news was 6B, where used to be Johnny's studio, so I actually met some people, and they took me in, and I was like, this is where Johnny broadcast, and I'd go up to 8H and go to Saturday Night Live, and just really loved working in TV. I had a day job from everywhere from Spin City with Michael J. Fox part-time. I was an intern. And then I worked at the Colbert Report for Comedy Central with Stephen Colbert, with Letterman. So I was lucky to work in the medium, but there was always something about Carson that I just, for somebody that was that dominant in popular culture and just entertainment, was really a lack of information on what went on behind the scenes at the show. And just I had so many questions. So when you referenced the American Masters, Johnny Carson, King of Late Night, Peter Jones was really a huge inspiration for me starting out with the podcast. I actually sat down with him at his office in Beverly Hills and I interviewed him. I was going to do just an interview podcast, but I told him afterwards, I have this idea. I want to do a Johnny Carson themed podcast. And he told me, Mark, you need to do this. Tell everybody I endorse you, because his documentary was phenomenal, but I had so many more questions. And just the seas parted. I called Peter the next day and I said, Peter, who do you think I should have on my Carson podcast? And he said, do you want Carl Reiner's home phone number? Here's Doc Severinsen's cell phone number. And it just, everything opened up, and I just couldn't believe it. This is back when it was really hard to do podcast remote. So I was in people's homes. I was with Carl Reiner in Beverly Hills, Angie Dickinson in Beverly Hills. I was with Mel Brooks in Culver City at his office. So I was going all over Los Angeles, all over New York. And it was one of those things where I had no idea that so many people would want to talk about Carson. A lot of them looked at it as one of the best times of their lives, but they never really got to talk about it in depth. And I do lots of research like you do. So people kept thanking me for doing this. And I was like, no, I thank you. But it definitely, I think at talking to 400 people, I would hope 400 people, I got my questions answered, but I had a lot of them went on behind the scenes.
And when you were speaking with the folks, or at least approaching people,
Yeah.
was everybody responsive, or were there a couple people, oh, well, I'm not going to really say anything, or I have a different
There were
opinion,
just
or
a
what
few
have you?
people. I feel like I got the people I really wanted.
Right.
In terms of public figures, the people that I wasn't able to get that I tried were people that are not easy. Dave Letterman, Bette Midler, Jerry Seinfeld. Unfortunately, Gary Shandling, who I think I had a shot with, unfortunately passed away.
Right.
There were a few of them, like maybe Burt Reynolds I really would have liked to talk to. But I talked to, and Rickles obviously would have been amazing. But I got Bob Uecker, I got Doc Severinsen, and I got Johnny's producer, Peter LaSalle. I feel like the really integral people I was able to talk with. And I mean, I had the people follow me for 8 years when I was doing the Carson podcast, nearly 400 episodes. And the ones that really the public responded to were the behind the scenes people that were not famous, the people that were staff, that were talent coordinators. The gentleman who held the curtain open for Johnny, for example, Irving Davis, for 20 years behind the curtain, what went on behind the curtain. People that were talent coordinators in the band, stage managers. I think the people, Johnny's personal assistants, the people that really knew him from the show, those are I feel like the stories that really shined on the podcast.
And at first, of course, The Tonight Show was hosted by another legend, Jack Paar, who had a very different delivery and
Right,
presentation and style, and even some
right.
of the content, sitting in the chairs with the guest right next to them. And sometimes things got a little frenetic and unpredictable, but very fascinating. You can see some of those things online as well, the original material. But then Johnny Carson brought in, when Jack decides to move on to other things. And in the beginning, right, the audience had to, like, whenever there's change with anything, maybe even on soap operas too, when they have the role is now being played by Bob Smith. Wait, I like the other one. The adaptation to the new person, even great Johnny Carson had a little bit of muddy water he had to go
That's right.
through to have America uh, accept him, right?
Jack Paar was the biggest thing in television. Johnny turned it down. Everybody turned it down. People like Tom Poston would tell Johnny, "You can't do this. Nobody can replace Jack Paar." And Johnny turned it down, and his wife number two, was very instrumental in his career. Peter LaSalle, Johnny's longtime producer, told me that Johnny had no idea how powerful she was behind the scenes, hiring producers, firing people. And she was the one that got two NBC execs, Mort Werner and Dave Tebbett, to go to a Friars roast for Gary Moore, who had a TV show. And Johnny performed, and that's how he got the Tonight Show. And he turned it down. The NBC execs were not happy. And Joanne was just very persistent, said, Johnny, we'll do this as a team. He pointed out, he was a game show host on ABC, and every one of his ad libs was written. It looked like he was making it up off the top of his head, all prepared. Even his facial reactions when he would copy his mentor, Jack Benny, were written in a script. So he was not convinced. Joanne was the one that convinced him to do it. And Jack Parr said the only man who could replace me was Johnny Carson. Carson, in October 1st, 1962, debuts at The Tonight Show. Groucho Marx introduces him. And yeah, people were disappointed in the beginning. They called him bland and dull. And, Jack Parr was all about controversy, and you just never knew, if he was going to start weeping. And Carson believed this is an entertainment show. We are not going to do manufactured controversy, which he believed Jack Parr did. Johnny felt people are going to sleep at this hour. Or invading their bedrooms. They want to be entertained. They don't care about my opinion on politics. It's going to be an entertainment show. And it took about 2 years or so for the public and for NBC. There were constant rumors in the beginning. Merv Griffin or Jack Parr coming back to get the Tonight Show. Johnny, the first couple of years, couldn't get a bathroom in his dressing room at NBC. He had to use the men's room with all the other NBC employees. He definitely not until probably maybe the maybe 64 when he broke Judy Garland's record in Vegas, the tide started to change a little bit. And finally, by 1980, we know he gets ownership of the show, which is unheard of. And he is responsible at one point now for 25% of all of NBC's profits. So instead of Johnny working for NBC, it was really the flip. Johnny had all the power, and he did take advantage of that.
Didn't they even build him a tennis court, a beautiful tennis court in his property there in Malibu? I heard NBC had.
I know he had a tennis court in Malibu, not in the beginning. A couple of years in, when he moved there, he did in Bel Air. I think he might have had a tennis court as well. That could have been a gift from the network. I wouldn't be surprised. He was just so powerful, making NBC so much money, and he never forgot the fact that that NBC was having him do an hour and 45 minutes when he started. Then the show went down to 90 minutes and finally 60 minutes. But even on the weekends, he has 3 young sons, and NBC had him go to all the affiliates and do dinners and luncheons. So he was exhausted. He was just really tired. I think the first year alone, he did over 400 hours of programming. Today's late night hosts do 180 max. So, Johnny was just run ragged. They would say he would go home and he wouldn't remember who he had on the show. It was just a big blur.
I can imagine, yeah. But being the pro that he was, and humorous, and the timing and everything, you would just see smoothness on camera and graciousness on camera. And the banter between him and Ed McMahon was always hilarious. And sometimes when it would go a little awry, it was even funnier. And of course, bringing in Karnak, the Magnificent, bringing in some of these characters and some of these routines, tea time and everything, were ingenious as well, right?
Yeah, it's interesting to see the progression. Art Fern was originally called Bernie Schlock and didn't do the what people will say was kind of a Jackie Gleason, Reginald Van Gleason, people will accuse Carson of lifting it. Initially, it was just based on a slickster car salesman in Los Angeles, and when Johnny would take the show on some trips a couple times a year to Los Angeles, he would do that character. And then eventually it became Art Fern. He did some of the Jackie Gleason. But yeah, the characters were beloved. Karnak the Magnificent, he actually purchased the rights to that routine in 1950 from a gentleman named Carl Winston, who wrote a column in Collier's magazine. And he was the original person that came up with this concept. It was quiz spelled backwards, and he would give the some sort of answer, and you would have to come up with a question. And he got the rights, and he did it locally on a show called Carson Cellar. And when he was local, Steve Allen started The Tonight Show and was doing a very similar routine, and Carson was horrified and realized that once he started doing Karnak the Magnificent, people would accuse him of ripping off Steve Allen, even though he was the one that had the rights to it. So Carson wisely waited 2 years into his tenure in 1964 before debuting Karnak the Magnificent. He waited until the viewers were surely in the network were behind him, and he felt his job was safe and that he could debut that, even though Steve Allen still accused Carson in later years of ripping off the Karnak. That was by far, I think, the routine probably that the audience looked forward to the most.
Were they not friends from your estimation, Steve and Johnny,
I
or
think in
did
the
they?
beginning they were, because Steve had a Westinghouse show that was competing against Carson, and Carson would go on Steve's show. I think it was all good for a while, and then in the early, I think it was and Steve was Allen would guest host the Tonight Show. I think it was the early '80s when Fred Silverman wanted Tom Snyder out and was thinking about bringing Steve Allen in. That Carson nixed that idea. And then there was an incident with Steve Allen. I don't know what happened, but apparently he yelled at one of Carson's staff members, and that Carson would not tolerate that. Jerry Lewis was banned as well for yelling at allegedly at one of the staff members. He expected if somebody was going to be in his home, his studio, that they were going to treat everyone with respect. And between that and Steve Allen making fun of Carson's, Carson had this injury with a slant board. It was he was exercising and hurt himself. And Allen made a joke that Carson had fallen, oh my goodness, 3/4 of an inch or something, because the slant board's not high off the ground. And I think that, and him not being nice to the staff, that Johnny banned him from doing the show with him. I think he still maybe did the show once with Jay Leno, permanent guest host. But Steve Allen very conveniently waited till Johnny was off the air, because I think he was, before he accused Johnny of ripping off Karnak. I think he wasn't going to say anything, because I think he was still holding out to be invited back to the show, but he never was. And then once Carson was retired, he let go with what his true feelings were. But yeah, I mean, Carson made it his. I mean, it was definitely a staple. And when he would do the Karnak, just the audience would just break into cheers. They'd be so excited.
One of the things that people still remember too was the differences that had happened with beloved comedian Joan Rivers, of course, which was an unfortunate situation. And what's wonderful about the book, among all these anecdotes and humorous memories and more, you do delve into some of the topics that people have always had questions about, and have heard different myriads of amalgamations of stories in reference to, like one of them being the feud with Joan Rivers. You take a little bit of a deeper dive, and you set the record straight on so many things, which answer a lot of questions for people, us in the industry, but also the super casual fan at home. You talk about what really drove that feud between Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers, right?
It was really tough. I mean, Miss Rivers, who I got to meet a few times, very nice lady. She was deferring to her husband, Edgar Rosenberg, who had this idea for Joan they approached Fox Network, which was launching, and Barry Diller, about possibly doing a late night show. And Fox was very excited. And Barry Diller told me to his face when I met with him in New York. He told Miss Rivers, you owe Johnny an explanation that you are going to be going against him. You need to tell him. And Barry Diller said, I'm in a poker game with Johnny. He's my friend. It's me, Steve Martin, Neil Simon, Chevy Chase. Steve Martin, you need to tell Johnny. And Edgar Rosenberg told Miss Rivers, there's going to be unforeseen circumstances. Do not tell Johnny. All Joan's own friends said, you need to tell Johnny. He's going to be so hurt and ambushed. And she famously didn't tell him. And Johnny found out the night before the press conference from Brandon Tartikoff, head of NBC, that Miss Rivers had a show. And Johnny just couldn't believe it that Miss Rivers wouldn't tell him. They were in negotiations. She was in negotiations to keep guest hosting the show, and made no mention that she had signed this deal with Fox. And then the thing that really got to Johnny even more, which really hasn't been talked about, and Miss Rivers admits this happened, is that she tried to take Johnny's prize producer, Peter LaSalle, with her to Fox. She tried to take Johnny's producer. Every talent coordinator was offered double their salary if they would go over to Miss Rivers' show, and they all, out of loyalty and just not sure if Miss Rivers' show would work, they all elected to stay with Johnny. So those were some of the things that really upset Johnny. It hurt him deeply. And I don't think he got over it. I don't think Miss Rivers ever got over the fact that Johnny didn't forgive her. At one point, Miss Rivers did admit one of the reasons also she didn't tell Johnny is because, she had done this show just 2 weeks prior, less than 2 weeks prior, with Johnny, and had been the guest host right up until like a week before she had made the announcement for Fox. And Miss Rivers said, if I had told Johnny, he would have stopped letting me guest host the show, which is absolutely true. Everyone that went to him before said, I have this opportunity. And Johnny said, yeah, you do it. Thank you for telling me. And I give you my blessing. And he would have done the same with Miss Rivers, but he would have definitely stopped with the guest host. So basically she sacrificed a friendship for maybe 2 months of guest hosting the show, and famously he never forgave her. And that was that, and taking the staff was the thing that really got to Johnny. And Johnny owned David Letterman's show, and Miss Rivers was booked days after she did the announcement she was going to have her own show, and she's the one that canceled the booking. Johnny kept the booking, David Letterman kept the booking, and Miss Rivers said she wasn't feeling funny, canceled Letterman. And Carson could have canceled it, but kept the booking. And then a couple days later, Miss Rivers agreed to make an unscheduled cameo on Letterman's show. But there was no ban whatsoever in terms of NBC. Miss Rivers said she was banned from NBC late night until Jimmy Fallon put her on, but she did Conan's show twice on NBC late night, did later with Bob Costas. There was no ban. It was just Johnny felt he was hurt and thought it was poor manners and just didn't have her back. But he was fine if NBC put her on, and certainly that was Jay Leno's choice, never not to put her on him on the Tonight Show. Johnny didn't care about that whatsoever.
And he really was rooting for David Letterman to become the replacement when he was deciding to retire. And
he was.
The network went with Jay Leno.
I mean, you see, Jay had a manager, Helen Kushnick, who he went to every single affiliate at NBC and was shaking hands, taking photos, doing benefits, whatever the network needed. Jay was there, and he knew how to guest host the show. Where Dave Letterman was calling the NBC executives pinheads, making fun of the GE. And I mean, Dave really thought, and Peter LaSalle, Johnny's producer, who became Dave's producer, Letterman's, incorrectly thought that Dave thought if you just do a good show, that's enough, and they're going to give you the Tonight Show, and that's just not how it worked. And Jay was going to be a lot easier for the network. It made perfect sense that they would go with him, just in terms of he knew how to guest host the show, and he was going to be easier to deal with. So yeah, they never asked Johnny what his input was on who he would have preferred, but it would have been Letterman. But him and Jay were actually okay. I mean, Jay's manager, Helen Kushnick, planted a story in the New York Post that was false, that NBC wanted Johnny out. That would have been, I think, February of '91. And Johnny was really upset and knew it was Helen, and Jay denied it. But then finally, Helen admitted to Jay it was her, and Jay apologized. But they were fine. There was no bad blood between Johnny and Jay. It was just, Johnny preferred Dave. That's all it was.
Right, exactly right.
Yeah.
And some of the great guests, I mean, Rodney Dangerfield, it's just
unbelievable. His appearances are still really funny on YouTube, millions of views.
Yes, we're watching them all the time too. And you mentioned Rodney, and also Tom Snyder, the legendary newsman and host, and also, I didn't realize this till recently, but you touch upon it. Wayne Newton.
That's
and
right.
A little bit of a smoke and dust up there with Wayne, huh?
Yeah, Wayne Newton in a lot of interviews has mentioned Carson. One time he waited till Johnny had passed away until he really made some accusations. But he's told the story a few different ways. One was that he was watching the Tonight Show and he saw Johnny do a joke. Another one, he said he watched in the Capitol records and his drummer told him that he had seen this particular joke. And the joke was something, according to Mr. Newton, that Johnny said, I saw Wayne Newton and Liberace naked in a pink hot tub. What do you think that was about? Liberace was a guest host on the show and would go on with Johnny all the time, up until Liberace, I think months before he passed away. And Johnny never did gay jokes about Liberace. He would make fun of his outfits being, flashy, but Liberace thought they were funny, but never did jokes about that. And Mr. Newton said that Johnny did all these gay jokes. I did the research. To my knowledge, there was one joke only, and that was 1973. And Mr. Newton said the incident happened in 1973, and this was the joke. Johnny Carson was doing a Jacques Cousteau character named Jacques Cuckoo. And he would sample vials of water, and he could tell where they were the source of the water. This is the Pacific Ocean. And he takes a drink and he says, "Oh, this is sweet. This must come from Wayne Newton's pool." That was the joke. If it was lost in translation from the drummer, I'm not sure, but Wayne Newton did go to NBC Burbank and confront Johnny Carson. There were words, there was voices raised, but everything was good. Johnny apologized, probably told him what the joke was, And as an olive branch, Mr. Newton had never guest hosted the show, hadn't gone on with Johnny in years. And Johnny had Mr. Newton on the show with him to promote his album, allowed him to guest host the show twice, which was absolutely huge. And people that worked at the show said Wayne was happy to be there, and him and Johnny were totally fine. There was an incident. Wayne Newton did say at one point when he was on Conan that he had slapped Johnny or open-handed slapped Johnny, and Johnny told somebody I knew that was absolutely ridiculous. And for Carson to allow somebody on his show after something like that happened, I don't know if Mr. Newton misspoke or what, but he did say that happened. But it wasn't until 1980 they were all fine. It was 1980 where they were both bidding on the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas, and it was a sure bet that Johnny was going to get ownership of this hotel. And for whatever reason in Vegas, he didn't get it, and Wayne Newton got it, and that's when the bad blood started. There were three stories on NBC Nightly News that Mr. Newton had ties to a well-known mob figure, and I think it was Frank Piccolo. I forget who it was, but Mr. Newton alleged that Johnny used his power at NBC and his influence to get these stories on NBC News. And then Mr. Newton, I believe the next day, said that Johnny had nothing to do with it, and ended up suing NBC News. And won a lot of money initially, and then on appeal didn't get any money on it. I think it was like the third appeal, it went down to zero. So he was out a lot of money on court costs. And Johnny just never mentioned him by name. But then Mr. Newton waited till Johnny passed away, and then went on Larry King and said that the mob stories all emulated from Johnny Carson's influence without listing any evidence whatsoever. So that's all I know about Wayne Newton. I had asked him numerous times to come on my podcast and talk to me. I would have liked to hear his side a little bit more, but that's what I know of what happened. But Johnny never mentioned Wayne Newton ever again on the show. It was a one-sided Mr. Newton just saying that Johnny would do all these jokes about him after the Aladdin. They didn't happen to my knowledge.
You also, you mentioned too how Frank Sinatra basically saved
That is
Johnny
true.
Carson's life. Nice little segue there. People might not realize that.
Yeah.
Huh?
Now Tom Dreesen, who's a great comedian who went on Johnny's show a lot, he told me the story. He told me that Frank Sinatra and Jilly Rizzo both separately told him the story, and they both lined up. And I did additional research, and to my knowledge, this story. And I did lots and lots of research matches up, which is that one night in 1971, Johnny was still doing the show in New York at Jilly's. Joe Gallo, who was a mob figure, had just gotten out of jail after I think he served 10 years, and he had just gotten out, and he was with his girlfriend. And he had either gone to the bathroom or conducted business in a back room. And Johnny on the Tonight Show would talk about his drinking issue. He struggled with drinking. He was not a good drunk. He would say people would sometimes get fun loving. And he would want to fight the whole army. He would want to fight everyone when he drank. He was not good when he drank. He was drinking and probably drunk, and he made an inappropriate pass, did something inappropriate to Joe Gallo's girlfriend. And Jilly Rizzo, who owned the joint, told Ed McMahon, "Get Johnny out of here, get him out." And then Joe Gallo came back and found out what happened and put a hit on Johnny. Two things happened. First of all, Dave Tebbutt, who was the vice president of NBC, went to Jilly and was like, "What can we possibly do?" And I did the research on this. Let me see if I can get this right. Joe Colombo was the head boss, and he was also, I think, founded, or he was the president of some Italian defamation league. And the first thing that they had to do, and NBC did do this, is they had a favorable story about Joe Colombo, and it wasn't even on the NBC Nightly News. They put it on a primetime news show. I think it was called First Tuesday, which had way bigger ratings than regular NBC News, and they did a positive story on Colombo, and that did air. I watched it. It absolutely aired. That was one thing that they did. And then the second thing is Sinatra sat down with Joe Gallo and said, I need you to do me a favor. Name it. What is it? Leave Johnny Carson alone. And Gallo was so upset and basically said, "You tell Carson it only because he knows Frank Sinatra does he live." And Johnny never forgot Sinatra's loyalty. So in I think it was either 81 or whenever one of the Reagan inaugurals, Sinatra was producing it, and he asked Johnny to MC, and Johnny did not want to do anything political at that point. But it's Frank Sinatra. He had his life saved. He said, Frank, whatever you need. And he was there, and he did the entertainment. And that was the one thing. Carson was loyal to people, but if somebody did something like that, whatever they wanted, he was there for them.
There were some band guests
That's
too
right.
as well. Ellen
Yeah.
DeGeneres, William Shatner, and even friend
Yeah,
Carl Sagan.
that's
And
right.
I'd always heard, and you talk about that, and I always heard, and again, you probably know the actual details,
Mhm.
that he wasn't always excited when Bob Hope would come on because it would be something where the network wanted Bob to go on because there was a network special Bob was having. And again, some of the stories were the same and
Yeah,
rehashed, and
yeah,
it wasn't so funny or what have you.
yeah.
Um, did you find any truth to the whole not really getting excited about Bob on as a guest again and
Johnny
again?
loved Bob Hope. He loved his early work. He loved the road comedies. He just thought that Hope had reached a point where he was having trouble hearing and just couldn't even answer Johnny's questions in order. And it just got to the point where he looked at somebody like Jack Benny, Lucille Ball in the 80s and thought that they should have just stopped, and they should have, like, once the level of work went down, that they should have just stopped. And it was just hard for him to see Bob Hope do this to himself. That's what Carson thought. So personally, he liked Hope. He wrote him this beautiful letter, I think that's online, and I think in 97 or 98, about how much Hope meant to him. And it's true. It was just, he just didn't understand why Hope had to keep going and doing this when he was clearly not at the top of his game. So he would put him on because he was Bob Hope and had reverence for him, but just didn't understand why Hope needed to do that. There were certain famous people that just needed, up until they passed away, to be in front of an audience and that attention. But Johnny, when he was 66, said, I did it. It's 30 years. I was number one. I did the best work I'll ever do, and that's enough for me. And he had every offer to come back, but once he left, I mean, that was it. Unlike Bob Hope, but he did expect, and Dave Letterman was like this. If you're a guest, if Johnny had a guest, and Johnny did look at it that they were a guest in his home, and he expected certain manners. Mr. DeGeneres was told not to do a specific joke that Johnny found offensive, and Miss DeGeneres did it. So Ellen was not welcome back with Johnny. Carl Sagan corrected Johnny twice and interrupted him, and Johnny just thought the way that it was done was very abrupt, and he was. You think for somebody that's that famous that you wouldn't be as sensitive as he was, but Johnny would say, critics hurt me. At anybody, I don't believe anybody that says it doesn't hurt. He was a very sensitive man, and that, even though he was friends with Carl Sagan, would go out to dinner after the show, after he corrected them twice and interrupted them, he wouldn't have him on again. William Shatner made 3 errors in Johnny's estimation. It was his 3rd appearance on the show. One, he wouldn't let Johnny get a word in for like 2.5 minutes, was telling a long-winded story with no payoff that was not in the pre-interview. And if you were not going to do the pre-interview, what's prepared, you better be as entertaining or better. And he wasn't. Second thing Mr. Shatner did is he turned his back to Johnny and talked to Buddy Hackett, who was next to him on the couch. Johnny did not like when people did that and they turned their back to him when they were a guest. And the third thing is, back then, if you'll remember, they could promote their TV show, but Johnny, as Johnny would say, TJ Hooker is on Saturdays on another network.
Another network,
And
right?
they were not allowed to say what network. And of course, Mr. Shatner said, yes, TJ Hooker on Saturdays on ABC.
On ABC.
And they had to mute out ABC. So those were 3 strikes, and Shatner was never allowed back on with Johnny. He did get to go on with Jay Leno a couple years later. The guest host, that was fine. But Johnny, once somebody did something like that in his home and he thought it deemed it bad manners, they were done.
He did have some guests that were on where you can tell they just had a wonderful time together. Dean
Sure.
Martin, Burt
Yeah.
Reynolds, all the fun with Burt Reynolds too,
Yeah,
huh?
those. I think those hold up. Burt Reynolds for sure was, at least Mr. Reynolds would say that, he said, don't touch Johnny, don't do anything like. Basically, Mr. Reynolds, his first appearance, broke every rule and said he cut off Johnny's tie. Johnny loved it, and I think it was his first or second appearance. Johnny during the break said, "Would you like to guest host the show?" And it was really quick that Johnny had him back after the first time. He thought he was so funny, and that, I forget who the director was of Deliverance, but he was watching the Tonight Show and watching Burt Reynolds guest host, and that's how he got an audition for Deliverance. And that was, I mean, game changing for Mr. Reynolds. And he said really going on Carson was the biggest break of his life. And it was he was on the Tonight Show with Helen Gurley Brown, and that's when the whole Cosmopolitan Centerfold idea came about. And Burt Reynolds was at the Oscars, and he said he counted something like 5 or 7 Burt Reynolds jokes. He said it cost him the Oscar, that centerfold, but he became a household name as of the result of it and became the biggest movie star maybe in the world at the time. So he was always thankful to Carson. He loved him. When Burt Reynolds was going through money issues and was going through some ugly rumors, there were friends that abandoned him. Carson was always still very loyal and with him. Even through those tough times, Johnny was loyal to him.
What you could tell was evident, and what they did with the whipped cream.
Yeah, it was really fun. The eggs with Dom DeLuise. It was a party. Dean Martin showing up with a drink and a cigarette in hand. I mean, it was when Carson was in New York from 62 to 72, they would go to Los Angeles a couple times a year, and the shows went off the rail. It was unbelievable. And George Gobel was the only person that was supposed to be on the show that was planned. That afternoon, they booked Bob Hope to do a cameo on a sketch, and he ended up coming out. And then Dean Martin was not scheduled. He would just happen to be in the building. They put him on. And George Gobel's like, how am I going to follow these guys? And then Mr. Gobel came up with the ad lib, and he admits he had used that previously on the Steve Allen show, which is, did you ever feel, what was it? You would probably know it better. Do you ever think that the world is a tuxedo and you're a pair of brown shoes?
Right.
And that was a master ad lib. And it was just, I mean, it's historic television. And it is one of those clips that was lost for a long time.
Yes.
Somebody had, I think, a kinescope, and it was saved, but Johnny was furious. NBC erased the first 10 years, most of the first 10 years. So when they do an anniversary show in Burbank, when they move to Burbank, the first anniversary show they can't really show clips. It's all a sit down with guests. It's in tuxedos. It's Jerry Lewis, Jack Benny.
Remember that?
Governor Ronald Reagan comes on. It was one of those things that Johnny just could not believe that they did that to him. And luckily, like the Ed Ames tomahawk throw, Johnny, after that show, realized the brilliance and asked for a copy of that, and he kept it in his desk at work. And that's the only reason that remains.
That's true too. And a young clean-cut George Carlin would debut.
Oh yeah,
it's
amazing. Some of the kinescopes, but getting to sit down with someone like Ed Ames was amazing. I mean, he was in his 90s. I went to Beverly Hills, and just to hear how he had no idea how to throw a tomahawk. He shows up to rehearsal. They try to teach him. It's not going well. Finally, they're like, try it this way, and it sticks for the first time. And then he told me he went home to his wife after that historic appearance with throwing the tomahawk into the wooden the outline of a cowboy hits the crotch. He told his wife, "There's no way that NBC is going to air this. The censors. There's no way this is ever going to air." It was the funniest thing, and Johnny was very intimate that it aired, and it did. And oh my goodness, every anniversary show, they would show the clip, and a few times they didn't, they would get mountains of mail from people that would complain. So it just became this annual event.
Absolutely. And what was it? The cougar or the tiger that was in the cage. And he looks in and then he runs and jumps in McMahon's arms.
That was, such a good reactionary comic.
Terrific. He was so
good with animals and
good and so dry and witty. And what I love about it, working in the industry of broadcast and TV and radio, and really appreciating, like you do, his genius and respecting it and honoring it, is how people even today still refer back to Johnny Carson. Nobody will ever be like him. That whole scenario, that time, his delivery, his presence, his persona, his way of being, the humor, the quick timing. He was a magician, of course, too. He loved magic. They constantly use Johnny Carson as the gold standard. Sometimes they don't even say the Tonight Show. They just say the Johnny Carson Show.
True.
And, a lot of the shows today are wonderful, but
Mhm.
they're so politics driven, and that can get a little dicey sometimes. Where Johnny would throw in a little quip about Ronald Reagan or this one or that one, but the whole show wasn't focused just on that genre, and that way there you don't alienate the other half of your audience. Johnny really welcomed everybody and kept it that way.
Yeah, Johnny thought it was just he wanted to really did think that people that were going to bed at 11:30 just wanted an entertainment show, not anything educational. I mean, occasionally they would do with authors, but overall, he's like, "We're here to entertain." He did do political jokes. Anybody that was a president or anytime he sniffed hypocrisy in his eyes, he would go after. But I mean, Nancy Reagan did call the show twice. Once was upset that Johnny was doing jokes about Ronald Reagan dyeing his hair. He said Ronnie does not dye his hair. But Johnny the next day said, I've been told by a good source Ronald Reagan does not dye his hair, but he does bleach his face. So that was Johnny's response. And I know Gerald Ford wrote in his memoirs that he not happy with Johnny and Chevy Chase. The perception that he was a stumbler and falling over, and so he had problems. I know Jimmy Carter's mom did not like Johnny Carson until she finally went on the show and met him and then changed her opinion. But yeah, I mean, I feel like he felt his job was whoever was in authority to make fun of them. But you never knew how Johnny, his personal politics or who he voted for. I mean, at the end of the day, I think he did want everybody, and even if he was making jokes at their expense, to be able to laugh with it. So yeah, but there was definitely he tried to stay out and without giving his. Once in a while, he would, there was I know that he took a couple social issues. He would have certain guests on that when he believed in an issue, but wouldn't endorse it. Paul Ehrlich, Dr. Paul Ehrlich, he would have had on like 18 times, who advocated for population control, and he was a best-selling book. And Johnny would have him or Gore Vidal on, or Joan Baez would talk about being anti-Vietnam. So Johnny sometimes would have people on that he agreed with just to get their opinion, but wouldn't endorse it. I mean, he had Harry Belafonte do a historic week in February. I think it was February of 1968, where he told Harry Belafonte, "Have whoever you want." And Belafonte is like, "Are you serious?" And he said, "Yes." So it's like Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy, all these amazing, amazing guests. And NBC was apparently very terrified, and they went to Harry Belafonte and they said, "Now you're not going to ask Dr. King about race, are you?" And he's like, "No, I'm going to ask him about opera. Of course, I'm going to ask him about race." So,
Mhm.
yeah, he basically Johnny would hand over the reins to people that he agreed with politically. He might not say it, but he would give it to someone else to have that forum.
It's interesting too. You talk a little bit about the guest hosts
Mhm.
that and them realizing that it's not as easy to do hosting of shows and that kind of thing and keep everybody entertained, the viewers, play off, sounds people are making in the audience. And maybe there's a snake in the audience, responding to the guests, responding to Doc and the band and Tommy and all of them
Mhm.
there, and just being ever present, but making it look calm, cool, collected, smooth, engaged, and a part of it all. And that some of the others, Chevy Chase, others found it to be quite difficult to fill that role,
A
right?
lot of comedians could not do it. It was always interesting. I think it amused Johnny when they would get someone like Arnold Palmer or Joe Namath or Kirk Douglas, Lauren Green, to guest host the show. I mean, everybody from Peter Bogdanovich to Bob Crane to Cass Elliott, guest hosting the show. Some people were really good at it. Richard Dawson was very good. McLean Stevenson was good at it. Roy Clark guest hosted a lot. There were certain people that just could do it. Gary Shandling was one. Jay Leno became permanent guest host. Miss Rivers was phenomenal in terms of her skill set and doing the show. But to be able to do it every single night, I don't know of anybody else. I mean, Jay Leno figured it out in David Letterman, but that skill set was tough. People tried. Chevy Chase guest hosted once for Johnny and said it was the most difficult thing. He had never done a monologue, and he said no one is ever going to be in the next Johnny Carson, and just said no one has any idea how difficult this is. David, or who was it? David Brenner tried to do a late night show, and after it failed, he went on with Johnny, and he said nobody should ever try to host a late night show. And Johnny said it's murder. But you know, the public, it looks easy. He makes it look effortless, like Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods or whoever, athletic Caitlin Clark. But it was a grind. I mean, Gary Shandling said no one knows how exhausting hosting the show is and the amount of energy. One of Carson's competitors, Les Crane, in 1964 said hosting the show for 90 minutes was more exhausting than shoveling snow for 8 hours. I mean, they'd be absolutely exhausted with the amount of energy that they would expel during that time period.
That's actually a great line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have favorite moments, episodes, or scenarios from the years of Johnny Carson? Of course, he was on telethons and he did other things aside from The Tonight Show. But in reference to The Tonight Show itself, were there moments and episodes that were your personal favorites?
I always loved when he was with, they would call them the civilians. They would be with either kids or senior citizens or people that weren't famous. And Johnny would just sit down with them and just get them to open up. These were sometimes people, middle America, that had never been on an airplane. They certainly had never been in a TV studio. And he would, for whatever reason, Carson had this skill set where people would just forget they were on TV and just open up. And I always thought that those were he had so much respect for his guests. He never made fun of any of them, the older people especially. He just had this great respect and would be able to just let his guests shine. Peter Lasalle, Johnny's producer, told me that was what made Johnny unique, that he was out to make his guests look good. That was the number one thing. I think those were some of my favorite. And whenever the show would let loose and it was just like, you know, Burt Reynolds with the shaving cream, there's a sketch. I don't think it's online, but they did a Christmas medley and it's a takeoff of those Christmas specials. And it's snowing in the background with fake snow and Christmas trees. And it's Johnny, Pat McCormick, I think maybe Tommy Newsom and Ed McMahon. And they're all having heavy coats on and they're doing all the Christmas songs, and the snow is coming down at a regular speed, and then slowly as they're singing, the snow goes faster and faster, and soon they're buried up until their necks with snow, and soon like they can't even sing as the snow is coming down so hard. Just as a visual gag, I really got a kick out of that. I think Carson is a reactionary comedian. I mean, Jerry Lewis said he was up there with Chaplin in terms
Right.
of his genius. He was, you know, he definitely studied Jack Benny and loved Benny. I mean, that was one of the only two or three times that Johnny did not do a monologue. Was the first show back after Jack Benny had passed away. And his wife, Joanna, who passed away recently, said that Johnny was inconsolable. I mean, it was 3 hours of sobbing, just would not stop crying after Jack Benny's funeral. And it was the first show back that Johnny eulogized Jack Benny at the desk, and for they didn't do the monologue. So, yeah, he had that reverence, but you could see the Jack Benny influence in the reactions, which Bobby Quinn, who was Johnny's director, would capture them beautifully. I mean, Bobby Quinn could really foresee where Johnny was going, and those reaction shots were what made so many of those laughs.
You know, one of the other guests that, and I don't know if you had a chance, I'm sure you've had a chance being in the New York area to meet. He became a dear friend. He was a guest on our show here, but I had met him several times before at various events in New York that we're at, some galas and different things. And he was a regular over the years on that show with Johnny, The Amazing Kreskin.
Oh, Kreskin, yeah.
Yeah.
I love Kreskin.
Did you get a chance to chat with him or meet him?
Yeah,
at
I
all?
went to his home, and then we,
He's
yeah, I got
amazing,
to meet him
wasn't
a
he?
few times. He's great,
Yeah.
Caldwell, New Jersey, I think. But yeah, I went to his home, and yeah, he was unbelievable. He had some great Carson stories, and really just respected Johnny. You know, James Randi, who the amazing Randy, did tell me that there was an incident. I knew that his appearances with Carson stopped at one point, and he kept going on with guest hosts. But according to James Randi, what happened is Johnny asked Kreskin after one of the appearances, he said, "How did you do this?" And Kreskin said, "I don't know." He was basically, I guess, saying that he had powers, and Johnny just thought Kreskin was just a good magician, and that anybody who claimed to have powers was lying. And so, for whatever reason, Johnny perceived that this was, I don't know, that this was unacceptable, so he was not allowed on. But Kreskin went on a decent amount and was really, really great, a broadcaster, and loved Johnny. And then, I mean, it was really tough. Like someone like Orson Welles, who was a magician, Johnny loved, and Orson Welles was guest hosting the show. And then one point he tells Johnny he's going to do a Kreskin routine when he guest hosts, and Johnny said, "You're going to do what?" And Johnny on his day off snuck into the studio in the back with a disguise incognito. And Orson Welles did a routine, mentalist type routine, but he had two plants in the audience, two stooges. And Johnny found out there were two plants in the audience, and he thought, as a magician, that's inexcusable, and then would never let Orson Welles back on the show. Johnny had very certain rules. For example, Penn and Teller, one of the writers told me on Carson, he wouldn't have them on the show only because they would give away how some of their magic tricks were done. They would show the audience. So that violated whatever Johnny thought about magic. So if something like that was violated, he just wouldn't have them on. Like, he would not have on people that were like Gilbert Gottfried or Judy Tenuta that you couldn't tell if they were for real or not. Like, if it was Super Dave Osborne or Father Guido Sarducci and it was obvious, he would put them on if the audience could tell they were doing a bit. It was a bit. But if you couldn't tell if they were in character or out of character, he would not put them on. That's why he was very concerned with Tiny Tim. At first, he couldn't tell if he was for real or not. And by the end of the first appearance, he knew that this was actually Tiny Tim. He was being legit, which is why he let those bookings stay. He was convinced after Bob Uecker's first appearance, Johnny was convinced there's no way this guy played Major League Baseball, and he's a comedian. That he's just so funny and witty. There's no way this is for real. And his talent coordinator is like, no, he's legit. And Johnny found that out, and he was like, oh my goodness. But he suspected. He just wanted to make sure that the people that were going there, he had so much respect for the audience, Johnny did, that the people that were going there, that were the audience was transparent and could tell if it was a joke or not a joke.
I mean, the wild moments that he had with Robin Williams.
Yeah.
Robin Williams was almost at his best
He
on
was.
that show. Wow.
He was one of Johnny's last guests, second to last guest. Now, Robin Williams was someone that Jack Rollins, was a famous comedy manager, kept Robin Williams off the Tonight Show. You know, it's really strange because now every movie star goes on all the late night shows, but back then you would not see Meryl Streep or De Niro or Pacino on a late night show. And Robin Williams was someone that Johnny wanted and finally was able to get him on the show. And just Williams was shined. And when it came to who we went on the final show with guests, the penultimate show on May 21st, 92, I mean, you're not going to get any better than Robin Williams and Bette Midler. I mean, it was magical television. Bette Midler, of course, won an Emmy. And there's still people to this day that consider that the final Tonight Show. Johnny wanted that to be the last episode. He said, how are we going to come back one more night after this? We're not going to be able to outdo ourselves. We should just stay home. And he did come out and they did a clip show and it was beautiful. But Robin and Bette and him was amazing. I mean, I think it was the only time that after the show, Johnny invited the guests down to his basement office and they just marveled. Robin Williams called Johnny the next day crying in tears. He was just so moved that he got to be on that second to last show and just how beautiful that episode was.
You're right. It does seem like that should have been the finale because it was so good. And when she sang, to him and that shot of her and then him at the desk, just sort of like taking it all in. And it was really moving. As part of research, again, you've had over 400 interviews with people and really, here's the book, folks. As we're having just a wonderful, it's like we're having coffee together, Mark and I, just having a conversation about a guy and a series and everything we love so much. There is the book. You can get all of this that we're talking about and then some in this incredible book. How long did it take you to write the book?
About 4 years.
4 years, huh?
Time just going through all my interviews and then just trying to do as much research as I possibly could, because especially those New York years, a lot of it was lost. And I wanted to know really what was going on in New York. And then I was able to interview people that wouldn't talk to me for the podcast. Someone like Jay Leno gave me 50 minutes. So I just tried to get to as many people as I could. And then Jim McCauley, who was the talent booker for the comedians primarily from 1977 to 1992, I was in touch with his son, James McCauley Jr., and he was so kind to let me use an unpublished manuscript that his father had written about his times at the Tonight Show. So I was able to use that as within the book. So my goal was to give people that really love Johnny Carson and the Tonight Show as much new information as possible. At the same time, people that might not be familiar with Johnny, for that to be as entertaining for them as well. but it was important for me to really go back to those early years. I mean, I talk about Johnny's very first show, about this first interview ever. He's sitting down interviewing Rudy Valley, and there's an intruder that comes out to the from the audience in a disguise. It was Stan Berman, who was a gate crasher, who was infamous for crashing the Oscars when Bob Hope was giving a speech or talking, and handed him a fake Oscar. He was famous for posing with JFK. He crashed the JFK inaugural and got a photo in the booth with Jack Kennedy and his family. And Johnny's first interview, this guy runs down from the stands, and Johnny was very calculated and cool and said, I think if you could please, we're in the middle of something, but thank you. And the critics lauded Johnny for how he handled it, but just the fact that actually happened, his very first show. I thought that was fascinating when I would find those things out, and I just wanted to just show the public that Johnny was doing an hour and 45 minutes and what actually did happen that very first show. Because I got to talk to Mel Brooks, I got to meet Tony Bennett a few times, and I talked to him a little bit about it too. And just it was historic TV, and nobody thought back then. 30 years. It was the most somebody had done one of those shows is like 5 years. I mean, Steve Allen, Jack Parr, you do it for 4 or 5. Johnny had no idea. I mean, he thought several times in 65 and then 79 that, this is going to probably be my last year. And he just loved it so much. And I think he realized that once it was over with, it would have been very hard to come back. Most people, when they leave those shows and they try to do a comeback, it didn't work. Jack Parr tried after he left The Tonight Show. Dick Cavett told me that Parr said it was the biggest mistake he ever made was leaving The Tonight Show.
Didn't Arsenio Hall have a comeback too? Wasn't there? I think there was another version
of the show, and I think it lasted maybe a season. I think it was supposed to come back for 2 seasons, but for whatever reason, I think it was only 1. I mean, yeah, it's really tough. I think when people do leave, it's just what it is. It's I think it's just to make a success in general is very, very hard. But to leave and to come back and to try to outdo yourself is extremely tough. Johnny, when he left his show, when he addressed the audience, the final segment, May 22nd, 92, said, "If I find something that I think you will like and I come back, I hope you will be as gracious letting me into your homes." And he would take pitches in retirement, and he would go to his office in Santa Monica, and he definitely was intrigued with some ideas, but he just wanted, if he did give the public something, he just wanted it to be as good and as a level of entertainment as he had on The Tonight Show. And he just really thought, you know what? I did it. I dominated it for 30 years. I did it. I have nothing else to prove. And this has served me well. I'll let the work speak for itself.
Somebody we know and love, who's been a guest on our show several times and is a dear friend, and you've had the opportunities to chat with him as well, as John Davidson.
Yeah.
We were talking about him before we went on the air, and I think he said something to us as far as, I think he either appeared on the show or guest hosted in terms of being a musician or a singer more than anybody else in that category of being a singer or performer. Something to that effect.
Yeah, he was a phenomenal guest host. Yeah, usually for his monologue, he would sing, and the audience absolutely loved him. And you know what? Johnny, you could tell when Johnny felt comfortable enough with somebody that he could play with him. And he was one of the rare people. Him and Robert Goulet were 2 people who forgot the words to their songs in the middle. And John Davidson assumed, and then Robert Goulet thought that they would stop taping, and Johnny hated that, and he made both of them keep going. And you know what? The audience loved it. The people at home and the people in the studio, because you have these famous people that are they're humanized by, anybody can forget a song. And John Davidson had to have the audience help him. And I think Robert Goulet had to have Johnny come. And it was just wonderful TV. If it was somebody that wasn't famous and the audience wasn't on their side, he probably would have stopped. That actually did happen to a comedian who froze up and ran off the stage, and Johnny stopped and said, this could happen to any comedian. I'm going to intro him again. Please make him feel welcome. And they did that. And with the edit, and they couldn't tell that this person had an episode and had ran off, and everything worked out because Johnny he wanted everybody to look good. But the John Davidson, Robert Goulet thing was just pure fun, and it made them both look like good sports.
Right. And Johnny, yeah, he would find ways to sort of dust them off and make them look good and sort of exactly. Now, you've had opportunities to really, again, dig deep everything Johnny Carson. Look at this here.
Oh, yeah, that's my mug. That's my Johnny mug. Yeah, he would get these mugs. They were not allowed to be sold. This was from the Burbank Mug Shop, which no longer unfortunately exists, but it was right by NBC,
Right.
Alameda. And yeah, Johnny would get these commissioned, and I'm lucky to have one. And one of the pencils, the double-sided pencils that Johnny would have on his desk.
Incredible.
Yeah, and that was the final cue card. That was Johnny's final cue card. Now he wrote his final monologue, every joke I think except one or two, but for the most part he wrote everything himself. And you can see he mentions number one mentions Bette Midler and Robin Williams from last night and what the show meant to him going backwards. And kind of he didn't do a traditional monologue on the last show. He sat down on kind of a stool. He sat on a stool, but these were
Right.
just prompts. So he normally had a cue card that went from 15 or 20 feet from left to right, but this was just one card that he had that was for the final show, or it would have been two cards, I think. And
And
they
you
just prompted him, and he was as funny as he had ever been with that.
absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that's me. And the show, this was after Johnny went off the air, and the seats were still there, and that was Access Hollywood, and that's just me in the seats pretending that Johnny is performing, I guess. But
Hmm.
I love every opportunity I can, and it's been a couple years since I've been able to go back to NBC Burbank. Yeah, the mural is still there, thank goodness. It's now called the Burbank Studios, but the mural outside Studio One, the Elephant Doors, is still there, and that's me visiting the studio. But if I can get in there, and that's me with Jimmy Brogan, who was a Jay Leno writer and went on Johnny many times doing stand up, us making a visit. But whenever I'm in Burbank and I can get access to go into Studio One, the seats are still there, and you can still feel a little bit of Johnny. And then I go down to his basement office and just peek my head in, and yeah, that's where he did the monologue from the Star. So yeah, who had that? Mel Brooks. Yeah, people were really, really nice to sit down and tell me their stories.
I mean, what's it like chatting with a Mel Brooks? He's
He was
incredible, huh?
fun. The only reason I got him is because I was with Carl Reiner, and he had told Mel it was a good time and he should do it. And he was fun. He was doing routines from the 70s and 60s. He remembered going on with Carson, and he was just really, really funny.
Yeah.
Mel Brooks, we talked about how he had offered Johnny Carson the role of which went to Gene Wilder in Blazing Saddles, and Johnny politely turned it down. I think he loved Blazing Saddles. He actually was with his wife Joanna, and they saw Blazing Saddles in the theater, and they noticed Mel Brooks was in the back, and Mel said that he would go to his movie sometimes to see the reactions. But Johnny loved Blazing Saddles, but he just really didn't think the public would accept him as a movie star. He turned down a Steve McQueen movie. He turned down a lot of movies and a lot of money. He just believed this is what I'm good at. And this is
Yeah.
how the audience accepts me. And he would enjoy going to films, but he did Looking for Love, and I think he made a cameo in a Bob Hope film. Just
Right.
one little thing with that. I don't even think he had any dialogue. But
Didn't he sing? Was there one time he did a little something with singing? Not I don't know about an album or anything, but a little. I heard or saw something somewhere where he did a little.
he did some singing on the Tonight Show a little
Right.
bit. He tried in 1966 in Las Vegas. He had taken guitar lessons. He had taken voice lessons from Katharine Hepburn's teacher, Sue Seaton, in New York. So, he said many times, if I could sing like Tony Bennett or Steve Lawrence, I'd give up my comedy if I could do what they did. And he tried in 1966 at the Sahara to play a song, and he was being serious. He wanted to show a different side, and the audience thought it was a comedy bit, and they just started laughing, and they couldn't accept that Johnny was trying to do something serious, and he was very upset and devastated. So he waited about a year and a half, and on the show, he told the audience, and he had to tell them over and over again a few times, I'm going to be doing something serious. I've been taking guitar lessons. And he sang his favorite song, Here's That Rainy Day, and it's beautiful, and the kinescope still exists. That was one of the rare times. But you could see his panic a couple years previously when Pearl Bailey impromptu pulled him up to do a duet, and he did not want to do it. And it took him about a minute or two for Pearl Bailey to be like, what are we going to sing? And he's like, okay, we'll do Our Love Is Here to Stay. And he starts off doing the song Genuine, but as a comedian, you want to get laughs, and he starts doing the high voice and getting the laughs. But yeah, he did a duet with Steve Lawrence as well, and they said, Our Love Is Here to Stay. So Johnny, according to Steve Lawrence, was a frustrated singer, wanted to be able to have that ability. and sang a few times on the show. He really loved his music. I think that might have been his favorite part of the show were the musicians.
You had a chance to chat with Bob Saget too.
Wonderful. Yeah, Saget would tell me, watching Albert Brooks and Steve Martin, you knew how to put a Johnny Carson appearance together. And yeah, Saget Bob told me just how much going on that show meant to him. And he remembers after the show just hanging out with Johnny sometimes in the parking lot before Johnny would leave in his white Corvette. Johnny would be smoking a cigarette and just hanging out with Hope. And it was, hanging out with Saget rather. And just, it was magic time. I mean, it was just the most unbelievable time for these young comedians.
Because Johnny drove himself to work, right?
That's right. Now, Johnny didn't want a bodyguard. He did carry a gun. He had a license, a concealed license to carry a gun, and he would bring his own lunch in a brown safe paper bag. Very Midwestern. Would drive himself. Ed had a limousine. Johnny thought that was ridiculous. Johnny just tried to live the most normal life he could. There were a lot of threats to his life, so it was complicated. I mean, Mark David Chapman, who killed John Lennon, had a short list of people that he was going to kill if it wasn't John Lennon. Johnny was on the list. Various times people got by NBC security with knives and guns. Johnny, just for self-protection, felt he had to carry a gun, and was sometimes people would say maybe cold and aloof, but it was, people that knew him would tell me it was self-preservation, because he could not walk down anywhere without people trying to get something at him or take him by the arm and be like, Johnny, Johnny. So he would sign autographs, he would do photos, he would be polite, but he couldn't get any time to himself. And just for self-preservation reasons, he would shut down a little bit. But the people that I talked to that were friends with him, that knew him very well, told me the same thing. And wife number two said the same thing, which is that Johnny was almost the same Johnny you would see on the Tonight Show, was how Johnny was off the Tonight Show with them. It was a small group of people. Some of them said he was a little less gregarious maybe than he would be on the Tonight Show, but almost the same person. And I don't know if you could do 30 years like that on top and not be yourself out there. Now, he was an introvert. He was shy. I'm an introvert. And, I'm sometimes can be shy, and I like my alone time like Johnny did. But when he was out there, every indication from the people I talked to, he was himself when he was out there.
Right, because there is those stories about that he was very aloof and he really didn't engage with the guests, and he just
wanted to save it. Jay Leno would go backstage and say,
which is a great idea.
Johnny wanted the magic to happen on camera, and Dave Letterman took that note as well. But Johnny he wanted to save it for air. So during the commercial breaks, he's not chatting it up normally with people. And also, people have to remember, when he was doing an hour and 45 minutes and then 90 minutes, he was exhausted and pacing himself like an athlete. I mean, he was any energy during those commercials, he could rest and just get up his energy. And then the show went down to 60 minutes. And by the end, he was only doing 3 nights a week. But it wasn't out of laziness. It was out that he did not have the energy anymore in his 60s to be doing that show at the level that he knew he wanted to do, more than 3 times a week. And it was when he did do the show, it was such a huge event for the people at home and the people that were in the seats. Ed McMahon would make the joke every time that Johnny, the last bunches of years, would host the show, which is like, and you people in the audience tonight before the show are in for a treat, because the man who hosts the show tonight, whose name appears in the show, is actually going to host his own show. And Johnny would just roll his eyes, but he knew Ed was, was telling the truth, and it's just how things were. But just when you did get Johnny and it was a new show, it was a huge event, and it was, they knew they were in for something special.
You could see the bond that Ed McMahon and Johnny Carson had. You can see the friendship, the respect, but there were a couple of times where Johnny didn't always like everything that was said, and there was a talk of a possible exit for Ed. And you touch upon that, huh?
I think it's tough. I mean, they were together all the time. And I think if you're with your family, I mean, squabbles, things that are going to happen here and there. I mean, ultimately, Johnny knew Ed was so good at his job and would set him up brilliantly. And they could read each other's minds. And Ed would hold back laughs sometimes not to overshadow Johnny, and knew that where his meal ticket was coming. But there were a few times where Ed would mess up bits, and he gave away a joke that was supposed to go to Johnny, and Johnny was furious. And there were a couple of times that Johnny had to, or Ed had to go to Johnny to apologize. And, there were a couple of times where I think Johnny, just in his frustration, was like, I want to get rid of Ed. But I think it was just a few incidents, and then Johnny would reference, one was about a joke about a mosquito, and Johnny would reference that in years to come. Sometimes on the show, if Ed would overshadow or maybe overstep his bounds a little bit, he'd mention the mosquito bit. But it's going to happen. But they definitely had a friendship back in New York, especially. They would go out. I mean, Ed was Johnny's. Would took care of Johnny. They would go out to drink after the show sometimes, and Johnny was just not a good drinker. He would talk about his struggles drinking on the show, and Ed would make sure Johnny got home and got in a cab, and that Johnny would behaved himself. And yeah, there were definitely some really tough times and stuff. But Ed was there, and when they got to Burbank, they weren't as close. They would still get together on birthdays and anniversaries, and they would spend time together. But I think their dynamic did change a little bit. It got closer when Johnny lost a son in 1991 and then Ed in 1995, and Johnny was really there for Ed and vice versa. And I think that their relationship definitely became a little closer then. But, Ed just had very different interests. He always was about work, where Johnny had a lot more interests than Ed did. I mean, Ed would, at one point, was endorsing something like 60 or 100 products. He had Star Search. I mean, he was doing everything, and Johnny just thought that was ridiculous. It was just a very different world that Ed McMahon lived in versus Johnny.
What are some things that you personally were surprised to learn about Johnny Carson? You got a lot of answers to questions that the public at large and even those of us in this industry had questions about. You've been able to dig deep and spend the time and do the research and talk to the right people to get those questions answered. But for you, what are a few things that really either resonated with you, have stayed with you and surprised you?
Yeah, I couldn't believe the people, and I mentioned it before, because the media made him out to be cold and aloof without any friends. And I talked to his friends, and it wasn't true. And they all said he was the same Johnny, at least for them, on and off, which I thought was a huge revelation. I love talking to the comedians that would tell me Johnny would write down joke suggestions for their material. And someone like George Lopez, for example, took Johnny's note and tried it out in a club, and he's like, it worked. I mean, Johnny Carson he was very good with young comedians, with nurturing them and helping them. And Johnny's energy, because sometimes people would think, he's only getting to the show maybe 2 hours before the show, that he's not putting the time in, where a Dave Letterman or Conan is there all day. But Johnny was working on the show from the time he woke up. He just believed that if he went into work all day, he would use up his energy. When it was a show day, he would be at home, but working on the show, would not have lunch with anybody because it thought it would affect his energy. And routinely, people that worked on the show said that Johnny's energy, they could feel it. If he was behind them, they would just feel this bolt of lightning. I mean, one of the people that worked for Johnny said shaking hands with him during the show was like shaking hands with a nuclear reactor. Another person said sparks would be flying off of him right before the show. It would just be so show. And I just think the amount of energy that it really did take Johnny to do that show, and that he exuded, I thought that I didn't know about that. I thought that was very interesting, because he just made it look so easy. I mean, he made it look effortless. And it was the hardest. And as Dick Cavett told Time Magazine, one of the most punishing grinds in show business. Dick Cavett said it's like going to 200 cocktail parties in a row and trying to be the life of the party at every cocktail party. And Carson was able to do that. But yeah, those were some fun revelations that I got. And just, it was one thing after another when I was talking to people about Carson very quietly doing just some of the most kind, humane things for people behind the scenes, getting a comedian, helping a comedian get off drugs, being there for people when they needed them. They didn't have money to pay for a funeral, that Johnny would be there for them and did not want the recognition and would do things quietly. There were a lot of those type of stories. Children that would write him that had terminal diseases, and Johnny calling them, and Make-A-Wish, things like that. Things that Johnny would want to be very private and quiet, and wouldn't want the credit. So it was a lot of those type of stories as well.
Now, somebody else who you knew, and I had the blessing to know as well, who's filled with energy and would always say that he's only one man and he was saving the network, our wonderful Regis Philbin. And you had an opportunity to speak with him as well.
I had a day job on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire when it was the number one show on TV.
Yes.
And Regis would come out for the warm up and said, "Take a look at me. The man who saved ABC, enjoy this right now because she's not here. He was referencing Kathy Lee.
Right.
She'd be here, but she's giving Cody a bath. He's
Right.
only 12. So Regis would say that every time. And
Yeah.
yeah, Regis had the greatest gig because, he lived in the Reebok building, which is only like a block or two from ABC Studios and where he did the morning show with Kelly Ripa and with Kathy Lee. So he would just stroll in maybe a half hour before the show and Millionaire. But yeah, Regis was great. I got to go to his apartment and we talked to Carson and he had some great stories. And just as a broadcaster,
Joey Bishop,
oh my
too.
goodness.
Yeah.
Dave Letterman would say, and he would have to preface it where I know that people that aren't in broadcasting might think I'm making a joke, but when he was asked who was the best broadcaster was alive, he would say Regis. I mean, by far. I mean, his skill set and him being effortless on that show, on the live show in the morning without a script. I mean, he was able to do that Jack Parr off the top of his head and be interesting and being captivating. Regis's skill set was out of this league. Out of this world, rather. And he was a very, very nice man. He was one of those people that loved when people came up to him for autographs and photos. Sometimes with people that aren't in entertainment think, I don't want to bother them. I don't like that. He lived for it. So did his friend Don Rickles. Up until they both passed away, they needed that from the public, whereas Johnny was able to walk away. And they weren't. They needed that from the public.
There was a certain energy that when Rickles and Regis were together that was extraordinary. And they even went on tour. They were at Foxwoods and other places performing. Just really a fantastic individual and a true professional. You got a chance to also chat with Michael J. Fox.
He was great. I was an intern on Spin City, which was a sitcom. We taped it in Manhattan and Chelsea Piers. And I knew that Michael had a framed cue card from Johnny Carson that he had gotten out of the NBC dumpster before he got Family Ties. He was auditioning somewhere at NBC. And I didn't know it until I did the research that his dad was actually featured on the show. His dad had been in the audience, and Johnny would do this segment called The Edge of Wetness, which was a comedy bit. It was ridiculous. And Michael Fox's dad was part of that. So I showed him the clip, and yeah, I mean, it was the reason I was able to get a lot of these people, including Michael. He was really nice to me when I was at Spin City, but also it's just like they loved Johnny. And they never got to really talk about him in depth. Neil Patrick Harris went on when he was a kid and we talked Johnny and Magic. And yeah, it was just everybody that I talked to just seemed at least delighted. Kevin Nealon, he still says, even though he was on Saturday Night Live for 9 years, going on Carson was the biggest moment of his career. Even Jerry Seinfeld, who arguably maybe had the most successful sitcom of all time, still says going on Carson, that was the biggest break of his career. That was the most special moment of his career, not, dominating NBC and the sitcom history. I was going on Carson that first time.
Yeah. Brooke Shields.
Yeah. Yeah, she was great with Johnny. Johnny would always tell her after each appearance, after when it was done in between commercials, he would say, "Don't ever change. You were such a sweet, nice young lady. Never change."
Yeah. Somebody else we both loved, Florence Henderson.
She was great. I went to Marina Del Rey and she had a boat, and she remembers seeing that Johnny called her up and said, I just got a boat and I've seen you around. And yeah, she would go on the show back in New York primarily. And she was at Tiny Tim's wedding. So she sang at Tiny Tim's wedding. She reminded me. And she had some great, great stories.
She was so pleasant, really just a delightful person. Jennifer Tilly as well.
Yeah, she was great too. She went on the show a lot. She was bumped. Jennifer reminded me she was bumped for the Potato Chip Lady because the Potato Chip Lady was doing so well. They had an extra segment and she was bumped. But Potato Chip Lady, I mean, that's one thing that was uniquely Carson.
Yeah.
Most of the times he would put the civilians on first, the people that weren't famous. Now it's like always the biggest famous person first. But back then, most of the time, the civilians were on first before the big celebrities, which I thought was wonderful.
When you think about it, it really was true variety because he would have, the Potato Chip Lady. And wasn't there a Nut Lady too?
Yeah, there was a Nut Lady that went on that talked about nuts. She was an older lady herself. And yeah, I mean, they had these talent coordinators. This is pre-internet, if you can believe it. They would go through 80 newspapers a day, local newspapers, national, and just really hunt for things. People would send in tapes and they would watch everything. And their job was just, Johnny had done this 30 years and to try to find the most the interesting stories. And then they would get them on the phone and see if they could carry a conversation. And some of these people had interesting stories, but might not be able to be interesting for a few minutes at a time or have the necessary skill set to go on with Johnny, but other people did. And I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of people that just would go on that show and their lives would change, from comedians to authors to singers. Someone like Jimmy Buffett, for example, I talked to him and his people told me he's so excited to talk to you, Mark. And I said, why would this iconic singer be excited to talk to me? And Mr. Buffett told me, Mark, you don't understand. The reason I'm excited is I've been doing this for decades and nobody has ever asked me about going on Johnny Carson. Biggest moment, the biggest break of my career, opening up for the Eagles and going on with Johnny. And you're the first person to ever ask me. And that is why he talked to me. And we talked about Johnny in depth and it was wonderful.
Really fantastic stories, amazing stories.
It's
And
been
you
really nice to share them. I couldn't believe it. Never foresaw it going past a few episodes, and it just, 8 years, and the audience that I didn't know there were people like us, Jim, that existed that loved Johnny this much. Occasionally I would meet people that say, "Oh, I like Johnny," and they knew very little about the show. But in terms of the people that were behind the scenes and everything, the stuff that we knew, I didn't know there were other people like us. And thank goodness, that was just so nice of people all around the country and around the world that would email me that they love Johnny as much. And it was just a great discovery that everybody, that there were other people out there that shared our love and passion, and that followed me on that 8-year journey of doing the podcast. And now with this book out, that people have been so kind to supporting me on that. It means the world.
Somebody, one of the viewers, and we thank everybody, all these great comments that are coming in too, mentioned Carol Wayne as well.
Yeah.
So
She was great. She was a matinee lady. She would go on the show. She would be a guest on the show. And at one point, unfortunately, she said something a little off color. Johnny deemed it off color. And, a lot of people think that Teresa Genzel, who became the matinee lady after Carol Wayne, that it was after Miss Wayne passed away that's why Teresa Genzel came on. But Miss Wayne said something during the interview that Johnny deemed was not appropriate for TV, and that's why she didn't come back to the show. But yeah, she was great on the show. She's one of the rare people that in Burbank, I can only think of 2 other people that subbed for Ed McMahon where they actually, it wasn't Doc Severinsen or Tommy Newsom or Shelley Cohen. It was Bert Convy and Carol Wayne were the only 2 people I know of that were the Ed McMahon for at least one show, where Carol Wayne would say, "From Hollywood, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson," and list the guest and then be the sidekick for the show. Yeah, she was really, really charming and really smart. And I couldn't believe that more than one person told me she dated Pat McCormick, who was one of Johnny's writers, who I would never see them together. But apparently that's true, that they did date for at least a little bit. Yeah,
just soaking that all in. I didn't realize that
Yeah,
part.
Pat was the gentleman in the mid-'70s who streaked The Tonight Show. Streaking was a big craze at college campuses, and Johnny privately dared Pat McCormick, his writer, who was, I think, 6'4", 6'5", maybe 6'6", to streak The Tonight Show. And he put a Johnny Carson mask on and streaked during the monologue, and NBC couldn't believe it. They tried to fire Pat, and Johnny said, "No, you are not firing him. I put him up to it. His job is safe." And they put a giant black bar when the thing broadcast. They didn't know how they were, but oh my goodness, the shrieks from the audience. But that was Pat McCormick. And then a week or 2 later is when the Oscars, where David Niven was presenting, and that's when they had the streaker, the Oscars, so the person run across the stage. So that was during the whole streaking thing. But that was probably Pat's most famous moment on The Tonight Show, I'm guessing.
You've been getting rave reviews, not only from people who love television and entertainment and comedy, but also from other legends and other performers as well. And some incredible comments coming in from people. It's extraordinary, huh?
People have been really nice. Like when Martha, Dick Cavett's wife, told me that Dick liked the book, it meant the world to me. I mean, Dick basically said, I thought I knew everything about Johnny, and this book, all these things came that I didn't know. And that was what I was really trying to do. I mean, there were certain guests that were worried, that told me, they said, "Mark, are you writing a pro Johnny book or an anti book?" And I said, "I'm telling the truth." This was always my answer. And one of them said, "Uh-oh." And I said, "You know what? Overwhelmingly, the book is positive, because that's talking to the 400 people. The reason it's called Love Johnny Carson is because so many people told me I love Johnny Carson." So I felt my duty to the reader was to write the truth. And, there are faults in this book that I write about, but Johnny would talk about that on The Tonight Show. So I thought that was fair game. He talked about being overly competitive. He talked about the drinking. And, he was not a perfect human being. He would talk about his faults, and that is reflected in the book. But overall, it's a celebration of his life and his career. And talking to those 400 people, I wanted to really share their stories and a wealth of other information that I learned from doing research the last 4 years that had nothing to do with the podcast, and just really try to do the show justice and who Carson was, and really try to put that into words.
As described too. I mean, it's a wildly entertaining book. One of the world's most obsessed and informed fans of the TV icon Johnny Carson, Mr. Mark Malkoff here, setting the record straight on Carson's legacy and shining light on the personality behind the legendary comedian and talk show host. And over the course of Johnny Carson's 30-plus year career hosting The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson appeared on some 4,500 broadcasts, interviewed over 25,000 guests, solidified himself as a warm, witty, comforting presence to U.S. audience, especially during turbulent times. And in the end, Mark's book serves as not only a biography, but also really a love letter to show business, to personalities, and to the singular show business legend of Johnny Carson. Job well done, Mark.
Oh, thank you. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, it was one of those things, a labor of love. I'm grateful that it's out and people seem to like it, and I've heard from a lot of readers, and I'm going to be going out to Chicago to their broadcast museum on November 6th that evening, and I'll be I thought it was Norfolk, but it's Norfolk. That's what the locals call it. Nebraska, Johnny's hometown. I'm going to be there Saturday, the 8th of November at 1:00 at the Elkhorn Museum, where Johnny has a lot of props and memorabilia. So I'm going to be there talking Johnny and signing books. So yeah, people have been so gracious, and I'm beyond grateful. And Jim, this was such a pleasure that I got to do this with you. This was so much fun.
The pleasure is all mine. And it was cool watching The View last week and Whoopi holding up the book.
Can you believe that? Yeah, this was so nice that Whoopi did that.
We had people, the family was saying like, he's coming on the Jim Masters show next week.
Oh,
and there he is on The View.
I am so privileged to be here. And it's one of those things where fellow broadcaster, this is great. I get to be here. And yeah, Whoopi was very nice. That was great that did happen on The View. And they did a book giveaway with their audience, and she mentioned it and was very, very gracious. I actually did work with her. I don't think she remembers me. She had a very short-lived sitcom on NBC called Whoopi, and I was there, and she was wonderful. She went on Carson 3 times, so I know that she really did adore Johnny. So I'm glad that it was Whoopi, that she was the one out of The View that did mention the book. That meant a lot to me.
You mentioned originally from Pennsylvania. Were you more towards Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or in the middle?
I grew up from the time I was about maybe 4th or 5th grade. I was in central Pennsylvania. I graduated from Hershey High School. So my dad worked for Hershey Foods and then the Milford Hershey School. So I was Hershey 3.5-hour drive to New York. So every time that I could get tickets to Letterman or Saturday Night Live, I'd go up there. And then before then, I was in Illinois. So I'm really excited to go back to Chicago and WGN and all that.
WGN,
so yeah. So I've been really fortunate. I remember going to WGN when I was in 3rd grade and see the Bozo Show, and always into television and the history of TV. So talking to someone like Fred Silverman, for example, the president of NBC, he was at WGN. So yeah, just being able to talk to these broadcasters, it was unbelievable. The people, the generosity, like a Herb Schlosser, president of NBC, responsible for Saturday Night Live, really championed it, hearing their stories. And unfortunately, like you mentioned, so many of these people are no longer with us, but I was so happy and honored to get their stories.
I would mention Pennsylvania too, because I would imagine if you had been born earlier, I could see you. And if I was closer, I was, in New York, but if I had been closer, I could see you in the audience of KYW Channel 3 when they were filming the Mike Douglas show.
Oh, yeah.
There in Philadelphia.
That's right. Yep. I love talking to people that work for Mike Douglas. There were a couple talent coordinators that I spoke with, and we talk about the Mike Douglas, and I talked to people that co-hosted the Mike Douglas show. But Yeah,
We just had Mason Reese on a week ago, who
he talked
co-hosted
about
Another Lap.
Carson. He talked
Yes.
about I
Yeah.
watched that
Yeah.
wonderful interview, and he
Oh,
mentioned
great.
that
Thank
one
you.
of his regrets was
Yeah.
not saying yes to
His
Johnny.
parents didn't have him go on, right? Exactly.
When
Twice they
I
asked.
reached out to Miss Quinn Cummins, and he mentioned that that was the factor why he didn't think he should go on because Johnny for whatever reason, it didn't really work. Miss Cummins, for whatever reason, I don't know. She wrote Johnny an apology letter, and I know when she got off the stage, she cried how it went. I thought it went okay. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know she didn't have a good experience going on the show, and I think Johnny had mentioned the next week I think that Miss Cummins had written a letter, but yeah, I mean, Mason Reese, I thought would have been fun to go on the show. He's certainly being mentioned by Johnny, I think, in the monologues and on the show, but yeah, I don't know what happened,
Sure.
but that was interesting to hear him say that he does regret it.
Right, looking back now,
Yeah,
exactly. Thanks for all the great comments, everybody.
yeah,
One
thank
quick
you.
one coming in here from Maureen in Arizona. Wow, Mark, you shared so many behind-the-scenes stories that put a whole new spin on the persona that was iconic. Johnny Carson, he was truly a gift to late night. Thank you so much for being Jim's special
Oh, this
guest.
is my
Thank you.
honor, Maureen. I'm so happy to do this and just be able to talk about Johnny and the Tonight Show. And to me, it's the best time capsule. 30 years for future generations to look back on what was popular entertainment, the fashion, the movie stars, the sports figures, where the politics was. It's unbelievable. And thank goodness for YouTube and the official Johnny Carson YouTube channel has over 1 million subscribers,
Right.
over
It's
700 videos, and they're
fantastic.
constantly putting up new material, and it's just, I'm just so glad that people are able to see those clips and that they still live on.
Go get the book, everybody. This is your first book too, right?
Yeah, I've never done this before.
Congratulations. I
Oh,
mean,
thank you so
what a
much.
what a subject to pick for a first one.
Gosh, I was definitely it was I felt I just wanted to do it justice to the reader, and I'm happy with how it turned out. My publisher, Dudden Books, was very supportive and
Mhm,
patient with me. They gave me a little bit more time. I needed more time, I felt, to tell the story right, and I was able
mhm.
to get that time, so I'm grateful. But yeah, Love Johnny Carson is out there. It's in bookstores, it's Amazon, it's Barnes and Noble, it's all over the place, and
Is
hopefully I'll
it
be doing
Kindle
more book
too?
events. Excuse me?
Kindle as well?
Yes, and I did the
Yeah.
audiobook over 5 days. I was terrified out of my
Were
mind.
you?
Well, the gentleman who was directing me had done, everyone from Oprah's book. He
Mm,
did people like Elvis Costello, just really huge people, Bono, and I'm
big
like, "I'm so
names,
sorry you have
yeah.
to direct me now." And he told me, "Oh, I love Johnny Carson. I love late night." So I was in good hands, but I just wanted to make sure if people were, going to Audible or that they would just get a very good product, but I was in good hands and the audiobook turned out very well. But if people want to listen to that, yeah, I've recorded that over 5 days. That's available as well.
And quick one here from Kathleen Walker in New York City. Great conversation. Very interesting. Loved hearing about Johnny Carson. Thanks for being here, Mark. Got to check out your book.
Oh,
Good
thank
luck
you.
with it as well. And Pam is in Maryland, real quick. Thank you, Mark. He should be remembered.
Oh,
Johnny
that's so
Carson.
nice. Yeah,
Really nice.
I talk
Yeah.
about it in the book. I don't go into a lot of depth, but just the fact I found it amazing when Johnny passed away 2 years later. There was a website called The Smoking Gun, and they published documents that Johnny had secretly left $180 million to a Johnny Carson foundation with charities, and they still fund amazing, amazing charitable organizations that really need this that have helped so many people. And I think that in terms of his legacy, you have the 30 years of him hosting the Tonight Show, but his legacy still is going today strong with the Johnny Carson Foundation.
Hmm.
Just so many important charitable organizations that Johnny funds today. And education, as well as alma mater at the University of Nebraska Lincoln. Just the donations, that man's philanthropy is unbelievable. At the time,
Incredible.
it was the highest, most money that any entertainer had ever left. I mean, I think David Geffen might have broken it, but $180 million. Yeah, that says a lot about the man, I think.
I still can't get over that a lot of the original tapes are what? Several miles below ground.
Yes, they're
And
in a salt mine. There, I would
right?
love to visit that salt mine, but it's just that those are the most
Where
ideal.
is that? Colorado or
It's
somewhere in the
something like that.
Midwest?
Is it
Yeah.
Utah? It might have been
Yeah.
Colorado, but there is a salt
Somewhere.
mine, and they're miles below the
How
surface.
ingenious to think of that, so they're
Yeah,
preserved, right?
that's right. Yeah.
Really, and he created the whole entity of Carson Productions, Carson Entertainment.
Yeah,
I mean,
Johnny, when he
it
was
was
in
very
retirement, was
smart.
Johnny was the one. He really resisted putting clips out on VHS, and there was just such a demand for it, and he got a really good offer. And Johnny handpicked those moments. There was a VHS set and then became a DVD set, and I think they're still might available, maybe digitally now. But Johnny picked his favorite moments from the Tonight Show, comedians, animals, guests, and it's just great. And then obviously with YouTube now, even more moments. But yeah, the work lives on, and there's just so much stuff that holds up, and it's great that other generations are just still discovering him and the work.
Absolutely. So true, Pam and Marilyn there. His legacy lives on, and Mark is keeping it going in a beautiful way. Again, folks, there is the book. It is a love letter on so many levels. He answers a lot of questions. He dug deep, over 400 interviews with some of your favorite stars and others that have worked with Johnny, knew Johnny, loved Johnny, staffers, and so much more. Love Johnny, one obsessive fan's journey to find the genius behind the legend. Hopefully, we shared some of it with you here as we celebrated the gentleman who just a number of days ago, 100th birthday, right?
Can you believe that? Yeah, 100,
Wow.
born October 23rd, 1925 in Corning,
Yeah.
Iowa. And
Yeah.
yeah, I can't
It's
believe
and
it.
Marion Ross just turned 97 this week. Rod Serling, 100 this year as well. Where's the time going, Mark?
I don't know, but I'm glad we still have Mel Brooks. I'm glad we
Dick
still
Van
have Dick
Dyke.
Van Dyke. There are a
Dick
few that
Van
are
Dyke.
still around, and
And
yeah,
yeah, we just
thank
lost
goodness.
June Lockhart, who made it
Yeah,
to
that's a shame.
100.
She had a long, long life, and I'm glad, but yeah, there's still
Yeah.
some
What a
that are
wonderful
here with us.
special to her as well, honoring
Yeah.
her. Mark, really a pleasure. And
Thanks,
thanks
Jim.
for
This was so much fun. I really appreciate your hospitality and your generosity having me here, and this was great.
pleasure is all mine. Thanks for your generosity of time and celebrating with us. And congratulations again on the book. I
Oh,
know it
thank
was a
you.
true labor of love. It's available now, folks, literally hot off the presses just a couple of days ago. So this is exciting news. Come see us again. Spread the word about the Jim Master Show series. We would love that. We send love to your cousin Amy, who we know and worked with.
Amy
She's
Malkoff, yes,
fabulous as well. And we seem to know a lot of mutual people in the
exactly.
industry. And
Yeah.
I think we're two old souls, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. I like to roll like that. Yeah,
Old
I
souls,
think
but
so.
big kids in
Yes.
adult clothing.
Yeah, I like
Mark,
that.
thanks so much.
It's a pleasure.
Congratulations
Thank
on
you,
the
Jim.
book.
I
Thanks for
really
all the
appreciate it.
time.
Yeah.
And hope you really enjoy the time with me as much as I have
Oh,
with
it
you.
was wonderful. Thank you so much.
We'll keep the porch light on for you. Come back and see us, okay?
For sure.
Enjoy your time in LA.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Take
you, Mark.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Isn't that terrific, folks? Really great conversation, not only about Johnny Carson, but some of the experiences that Mark has had as well. As somebody who really loves entertainment and television and Hollywood and comedy. He's a comedian himself and a prolific writer, now author of his very first book, Love Johnny Carson, of course, and really fantastic. You know, we talked about some really amazing people and our love for beloved Regis Philbin. You know, I've talked about Regis quite a bit, and our love for Florence Henderson. There he is with Florence. I've had the opportunity as well to converse and know these fabulous people that we reference, some of them like Regis Philbin. And this was an amazing conversation I had with Regis, of course, host of Live with Regis and Kathy Lee, and then Kelly, but so much more. Of course, he worked with Jack Parr and The Millionaire Show. He was just really witty and funny and a legend. And he was one of my favorite people. And it was an honor and a pleasure to know him as I did. He was a real New York guy through and through, and tipping our hat, as we're talking about Johnny Carson, tipping our hat to Regis Philbin, who was a bundle of energy, and boy, do we miss him, huh? He just had that, you know, you wake up in the morning and he was on, and just he was terrific. And also another wonderful talent, Florence Henderson, and had an opportunity to chat with her, and she was Fantastic. Absolutely. What's really funny about this shot, she's actually sitting on my lap in this shot. And we were at a big gala event, and there's other people on each side of us, but the photographer had us squeeze together. Said, come on, everybody, squeeze together. So she was standing there in her beautiful white pantsuit, you can see there, and she just plopped down right on my lap. And I'm actually holding her up. There's another image of this where you can see a wide shot with the other people in this photo, and you can see where I'm actually holding her up because she's on my right knee. And I was just like dumbfounded. I'm like, wait a minute here. Florence Henderson, Carol Brady from the Brady Bunch is on my leg, and I'm holding her up. I just reverted back to 10 years old. But she was warm and witty and funny. And this is only about maybe a month before she passed. She was here on the East Coast, and she then was out in LA rooting on Maureen McCormick, who was on Dancing with the Stars at that time. And we also, talking about Carson, as I mentioned at the early part of our show, got a chance to, with my years with public television, with the good folks at PBS, on behalf of American Masters, that series, and WNET Channel 13 in New York City, was tasked with co-hosting this very, very amazing special. We did the in-studio conversations and breaks that aired in between the segments of Johnny Carson, King of Late Night. And there I am with my co-host from WNET in New York, Tom Stewart, who was a wonderful friend. And if you ever listened to 13, WNET in New York City over the years, one of the preeminent PBS stations, you heard his voice. Tonight on 13, that was Tom. Tom was also on Another World, the soap opera. We were looking back, we were watching some old videos, and we're like, wait a minute, that's Tom in the 80s on Another World? Really great guy. So we co-hosted these segments, and we had a ball. I should dig up some of the video of that and maybe transfer it digitally and bring it to this show and show you. And Dick Cavett was out in the Hamptons, and the interviews were happening at his beautiful home out in, I think it's East Hampton. And we just had a wonderful time. But that was a really terrific special on Johnny Carson, King of Late Night, for American Masters for PBS, and it was amazing. I've always enjoyed Johnny Carson. We watched him when he was on, we rooted him on, and he was amazing. And again, we've talked about him a lot here on our show. He's just one of those amazing people, and beloved. Was he perfect? Nobody's perfect, right? None of us are perfect. Nobody's perfect. Maybe a red rose is perfect. That's about it. But to celebrate his incredible talent and all the people who got their break and their start on The Tonight Show. And of course, now Jimmy Fallon's hosting it. And of course, you had Jay Leno. And go scroll back in our archives on our YouTube channel, folks, because we had Kevin Eubanks, who was the music director, and you always saw him in the front row bantering with Jay Leno on The Tonight Show. Kevin Eubanks from The Tonight Show was a guest here on the Jim Masters Show, celebrity talk show series. And if you didn't see that episode, it's archived on our YouTube channel. And we had a great conversation. Kevin hails from Philadelphia, an amazing musician. And he was co-hosting that game show recently with Jay Leno, that I believe was that on Fox. And that was terrific. And that was hilarious. So he was a guest on the show as well. We mentioned Kreskin, the amazing Kreskin. Kreskin passed away about a year or so ago, and he was a great friend of our show. And I had known Kreskin before I even started the Jim Masters Show, mentalist and so much more, and tremendous entertainer. You can see that episode archived on our YouTube channel as well on the Jim Masters Show. He was amazing. So several of the folks that we talked about were guests on our show, and we love that. Show you that book one more time, folks. Here we go. It is Love Johnny Carson. Check it out. You'll love it. We thank Mark for joining us here on the program. An amazing conversation. And that's what we do here, conversations, not really interviews. We have free-flowing conversations like Carson, like Cavett, like Regis, like Mike Douglas, Merv Griffin, all of the greats, and also with a modern twist of today. If you enjoyed this episode, folks, hey, a little homework, give this episode a thumbs up, like. Yeah, there's a like icon there. Man, would we appreciate it if you did that. We would love you. It's really, really terrific, those who do that. So you like this episode? Give it a like. Share it on your social media as well. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is Jim Masters TV. And leave a comment below. If you didn't get a chance to chat during the course of our live, we were live on this episode, but it'll be archived as well. If you didn't get a chance to chat in the JMS chat room as we were live, and thanks to everybody for all these great comments, drop a comment below as well. Let us know, what are your favorite Johnny Carson memories, moments, episodes, things that Johnny did, said, some of your favorite guests. Do you remember the potato chip lady that Mark referenced, and some of these other incredible skits and moments that they had on the Tonight Show in good old downtown Burbank, California at NBC Studios? Share those memories below. We love to hear from you. And again, you guys know I'm a broadcast guy coming from the TV and radio world. So I love to hear what you have to say and all the comments that you're sharing as well. So good stuff. Yes, we all loved. Pam says we loved Regis and Florence Henderson. We did. You remember her in the audience of Dancing with the Stars. Maureen said, great show. Thank you. Your mother's birthday, Pam. She would be 103 today. Well, bless your mom, Pam. 103. Wow, that's amazing. Kathy Jean, thank you for joining us here. Hope you come back and see us again. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. Give us a like. Leave a comment below. And welcome to our Entertainment Lifestyle Celebrity Talk Show series. If this is your first time, anybody watching for the first time, we welcome you as well. Come see us again. Check out our hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of past episodes. They are extraordinary, and they're all right there for the watching. We just did a terrific retrospective remembrance of the wonderful June Lockhart, who passed just a day or so ago. Check that out. You'll enjoy that. Coming up very soon, Michelle Lee is going to be with us as well. You know Michelle Lee from Knots Landing and so much more. And she was on the Tonight Show as well. And yeah, and also Ketty Lester. Ketty Lester was on Little House on the Prairie and so much more. A brilliant singer and actress. She's coming on our show soon as well. So look for that and so many more of your favorites. Did you see the episode with Maxwell Gale Jr., who was Wojciechowicz on Barney Miller? He was with us recently as well. Did you see the episode with KC from KC and the Sunshine Band? Or Andrea Bocelli's son, Matteo Bocelli? He was here. And we mentioned Marion Ross, 97 years old. God bless her. As of this week, just a day or so ago. Check out the episode when Marion Ross, Mrs. C from Happy Days, was a guest on our show, as well as Don Most and Anson Williams and Linda Pearl. And they've all been here. Sometimes a couple of times they've been here as well. Lucy Arnaz, Tony Orlando. A lot of our friends and favorites have been here as well. So with all that said, oh, and of course, Kathy Garver was with us, and John Provost, who was Timmy on Lassie. They shared some wonderful memories of June Lockhart as well. All right, gang, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us. Don't go anywhere. Another great episode of the Jim Masters Show Celebrity Talk Show series comes up in just a moment. So stay right there. More great shows and guests and conversation. And we love having you here. Don't forget to take care of one another, love one another, and don't forget to do the very same for yourself. I say it all the time. Sometimes I have to remind myself to do it as well. Time for some dinner at the time of the show here. Going to have some chicken, some vegetables, worked up an appetite. And I hope you have an appetite for more of JMS. Come see us again. We love having you here. We created this unique series for all of you and for you over there and for you there. And I love hearing from all of you. We hear from, we're here in the United States in the New York area. So we hear from everybody in New York and across the country and our friends in Canada and Mexico and all throughout North America. We hear from our friends in Europe and Asia and Africa, Australia, New Zealand. It's a blessing to have you here. And we thank you for watching and supporting and sharing and liking what we've been doing all these years. half a decade plus already, which is incredible. So we thank you. I always like to make sure to take time to thank everybody who views, watches, supports, and all the great guests who come on too. They're very busy and they take a moment or two to join us. It means the world. I'll make sure that we've kept that porch light on for you as well. I always say it to the guests, so I'm going to say it to you as well. And, we had a couple of Harp was here as well, and it's Harp 4803. Hello, Harp. Good to have you here, Harp. Welcome to the Jim Masters Show, and everybody that's been here as well. Again, Kathy Jean and everybody, and all of you who are watching this later on when it wasn't live. You're watching this in the archives. Good to have you with us. All right, time for some dinner on my end. Whatever you're doing around the world, thanks for being here. I'm Jim Masters. Thanking you for your time this time. Till next time here at Levity Hall and the Jim Masters Show. We'll see you again soon. George Burns and Gilligan from Gilligan's Island and Jeannie and her bottle, they say thanks for your watching and support and love of what we're doing here as well. We'll see you on the next one. And again, stay right there. More great episodes coming up of the Jim Masters Show. Be well, everybody. We love you all. And cheers.